Hello, Bucs fans, and welcome to Hear the Cannons. This is our instant reaction episode following what was another heartbreaking loss for your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They ended up losing 23-20 at home on a last-second Jake Moody field goal after the kicker for the Niners, coming off of an injury, missed 3 field goals in this game. And it felt like the 49ers did everything in their power to give this game to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but they simply could not take advantage. It's been a theme of the year. Speaking of themes of the year, some serious injuries we need to update on, and we'll talk about that. But before we do, please make sure that you are subscribing to our YouTube channel here. If you're not watching on YouTube, head over there, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you're checking out BucsGameday.com for all your written content. I'm a writer over at BucsGameday. You can follow me on Twitter at SI_Buccaneers. And I'm joined for this episode by Caleb Skinner, who's down at Ray J, along with a number of our other writers who are there. But he's the one we got hopping on with us. So we look forward to getting his thoughts. First off, Caleb, my question is, how much heartbreak can one fan base take?
It's pretty tough. This accounts for the third walk-off touchdown against the Buccaneers this year. Obviously, we saw it last week with the Chiefs. We saw it earlier with Atlanta, and now with Jake Moody. That's heartbreaking enough as is, and then you see a bunch of other players go down, and it's just starting to, fall apart. All different areas of the game for the Buccaneers. It's just you put the defense on the field so much, offense can only do so much, and you have a chance with Moody missing those 3 field goals, leaving 9 points on the board, and still can't do enough to get it done. So yeah, it's really tough if you're a Buccaneers fan to watch these things unfold. Get your hopes up at the end of these games. It's got to be brutal, watching it from the stands or watching from home or at the bar. They're in it. They tied the game up. They make a game of it, and a game that they probably maybe shouldn't have even been in with how things were looking early on. And it's I don't know where their blame can be placed anywhere on that. It's just kind of how the cookie crumbles when it comes down to it. But I can't tell you the last time I've seen something like this where the Bucs have had 3 games in one season come down to a walk off. It's pretty unexplanatory, honestly.
It is, and there's a number of things that I think we need to get to, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, obviously anyone who watched the game is well aware, Tristan Wirfs, arguably this team's most important player, went down with not a great looking knee injury, and he could barely put any weight on it. There was a report from Jordan Schultz that he may have escaped the dreaded torn knee ligament, and it looks like it might be a sprained MCL, which would be a huge win for the Bucs, because losing Tristan Wirfs, first off, I'll ask you, Caleb, would that be just catastrophic, ending any chance this team has of going on a crazy run now that the schedule lightens up, making the postseason? Could they even do that without Tristan Wirfs in the lineup?
You can. Obviously, you saw they were able to do it today. The whole thing with that is once you did see Tristan go down, the Buccaneers and Liam Cohen and the offense were just completely doing everything to the right side of the field. Every run was to the right side. Any rollout was to the right side. They weren't really going to really test that from the offensive end of things. So I don't know if that's sustainable throughout the rest of the season, but all early reports seem to be fairly positive considering how ugly it looked at the time of the injury. So if it is just a sprained MCL, luckily it's happening now. You get this week, then you have the bye, then you have all of next week to kind of see where Tristan's at heading into that Giants game, which you might be able to get away with it there, although the Giants did improve a little bit on the defensive side of the ball, especially along the defensive line by adding Brian Burns. But you might be able to get away with it there too. So it kind of depends on how things will kind of translate for worse over the course of these next 2 weeks.
Now, I have a question. So obviously the Buccaneers, San Fran getting that chance to win the game at the end was unfortunate. There wasn't many people I saw clamoring for, like, why aren't the Bucs being more aggressive? Like, they got all the way to the red zone and they just kind of run up the gut, and then on third down they took a shot which came up short to Rock Jarrett. Like, based on what happened last week, I'm just like, I know maybe they're trying to avoid leaving too much time, but I don't know if they're in a position. Like, should you not be trying to call a play to get that ball in the end zone to score a touchdown? Like, are you more worried about the clock than putting points on the board? I found myself wondering that a little bit and thinking, take a shot now. Like, run your offense to score points, and then you can still, Todd Bowles can do his thing where he just gets to trust his defense. Like, what are your thoughts on how they approach that? Not the last drive where Baker showed all that grit, and we could talk about that in a minute with that stiff arm to Bosa, but I'm talking about right when they got into that deep red zone there. Run up the middle, loss of yards, and then you're looking at 3rd and long, and you take a shot at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with the play calls as much as I have a problem with the personnel. Rachaad White hasn't necessarily been your in between the tackle run guy, so leaving him in there for 2 rushes down there at the goal line isn't necessarily ideal, considering we've seen him go for 1 yard here, 1 yard there. He did look better today, albeit he did have some good runs in between the tackle, following Graham Barton and his 2 guards, but he still hasn't been utilized as that type of running back the way that a Bucky Irving has. Bucky Irving has been getting kind of those snaps where you give him the ball in between the tackle, he can make something happen out of nothing. So leaving Rachaad White there is kind of questionable to me. I don't blame Todd Bowles at all for running it on those first two calls. You want to run the clock down as much as possible, knowing that San Francisco's got these timeouts still to utilize, and we saw what happens when you don't utilize time very well before with Todd Bowles, especially this year. So I think he played it the best that he could. But I think the wrong guy was necessarily in the backfield there. And you could have even said that, Sean Tucker didn't play any snaps today, but maybe you throw in a big body like him and maybe have a 2-back set with him and Bucky and make them have to determine which guy's going to get the ball. So it's more of a personnel thing than the actual play calling. I would have liked to see a little bit more on that 3rd down instead of, everybody run hitches and stop at the goal line type deal. So a little questionable there on that 3rd down, but you can't blame it all the way around. They did enough to even get down there in the first place. Baker doing Baker things, which I'm sure you want to touch on as well.
This was not a great second half or performance from Baker all game. Like, I'm not going to sit here and act like it was, like, especially so that drive and the drive before, prior to the stiff arm of Bosa, Baker, 2 fumbles. He missed a wide open Sterling Shepard on 3rd down. He was not executing, but you cannot question the grit of this guy, because I don't know how many quarterbacks in the NFL can withstand the pursuit of Joey Bosa with hands on him and not only not get taken down, slammed through the ground, but still somehow manage to be like, okay, I got Joey over here. Let me have a look. It's 4th down. Find a way to get the ball to Rachaad White, which was a great catch, by the way. Rachaad White's receiving skills are such a weapon for this team. We often get caught in the conversation between him and Bucky Runner. I think they're a good compliment, but Rachaad is a nasty receiver. But anyway, Baker is just so gritty. Like, you got to love him. And he ends up getting him down there. So you got to give him a shout out for doing Baker things. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Oh, no, I mean, it is magical, really. Like you had mentioned, I think up to that point, he might have still had under 100 passing yards for the game. So, coming way late in the game, not even having 100 passing yards, not going deep, not throwing a pass over 20 yards today. So, not the best game from Baker, but when they needed him most, he stepped up. You saw it happen on that play where he had Nick Bosa and kept him away with that stiff arm enough, gave him enough time to run to the sideline and hit Rachaad White, and then avoiding multiple other sacks on that drive on multiple different plays. It's just unbelievable that he's able to get out of some of those. And luckily for the Buccaneers, you probably got every single penalty in the book thrown on San Francisco there on that drive to really help you out, and you didn't really have to do much. But yeah, a lot of that goes to Baker being able to create plays, be able to make plays out of the pocket when his team needs it the most. And it hasn't really correlated to wins necessarily like we saw last year, but maybe eventually that'll start to show up here as we hit the second half of the season.
Yeah, and sure, there were some injuries. The Tyke Smith absence hurt, in addition to the Jamel Dean being there. Someone's got to play. And Todd Bowles went with Josh Hayes again after a really tough debut last week. And as Space Windu on YouTube comments, 32 has got to go. Josh Hayes had a tough day again. That penalty for one on the kickoff is not good. Like, that's terrible. You cannot do that. But even on the touchdown to Kittle, it's funny. I was watching the play before. He had a nice pass breakup on, I believe it was Juwan Jennings in the middle of the end zone. And the way he was celebrating, for lack of a better term, kind of pissed me off, because it was first down and he's there celebrating he got this pass breakup. And I'm like, bro, line up, focus on the next play. Like, I'm yelling at my TV at home. And then sure enough, I mean, having to defend George Kittle for what felt like an eternity is not an easy thing to do. But I just, that frustrated me. It's been a tough look. And then you got Funderburk giving up all that yardage. I think it was Pearsall who made that catch to help extend. So I don't blame those players. They're being thrust into positions they don't need to be, but it just really emphasizes the question of, does this team have enough depth in the secondary to begin with this year? Like, I don't even know where to start this conversation. Where does your mind go when we hear about people calling for Josh Hayes? The question is, what's the alternative?
Yeah, we know the alternative. The alternative is undrafted free agent rookie Tyreek Thunderberg, and we saw what he was able to do in his action during his first start, which was about 2 or 3 games ago, or 4 games ago, when Jamel Dean went down, and then obviously moving off of that, they decided to go with Josh Hayes at that spot, but. He's played questionable. You saw how rough it was for him last week, trying to guard DeAndre Hopkins, and then today it didn't look great. Gave that touchdown at the Kittle. Yeah, he initially had really, really good defense on Kittle until Kittle decided to turn and make a dead sprint for the corner of the end zone there. So tough to see, but and in that 5 yards, you're just giving them free yards. What was that? Ended up being a 44-yard field goal by Jake Moody to win it. If you didn't give up those 5 yards, maybe it's a 49-yarder. And Moody had already missed a 49-yarder and a 50-yarder today. So you never know how little those yards are. You think 5 yards, oh, it's not that much, it's not going to be killer, but that late in the game, you need every yard that you can possibly get. And mental errors aren't going to buy you any favors with the head coaching staff or with the staff as a whole, anyways. So it'll be interesting to see what the Buccaneers do moving forward. They could have made a move prior to the trade deadline at a position of really big need here. They decided against it. Jason Light and company decided to stay pat, and that's just kind of the reality of the situation until Jamel Dean comes back. But even then, you're still leaving Jamel Dean out there, and then who knows how long Zion might possibly be out now, because he suffered a hamstring injury late in this one too. So if once Jamel Dean comes back, maybe Zion's still out, and then you're still going to have one of these guys step up and try and do the most that they can possibly do. But it's not great, because outside of them, you have Tavier Thomas, which huge play for him, but he's more of a nickel guy, if you will, but huge play by him being able to create that forced fumble on the muff punt. So you're running thin on guys at this point. Maybe you can throw in Christian Izzian at an outside corner spot once Tyke is finally back and healthy. I mean, he was supposed to be until that late injury that happened on Friday in practice with a knee injury. So it's tough to kind of foreshadow what's going to happen at that position, but it's definitely weak. And losing Zion McCollum right now, luckily you have a bye week this upcoming week, because there's no way that you could enter whatever game you had next week, if you were to have one, starting with a Josh Hayes and a Tyreek Thunderberg.
That's for sure. And also worth mentioning, Chris Braswell, I believe, exited the game with an oblique injury. So there's another guy banged up, and the soft tissue epidemic in Tampa Bay is continuing on, and this team is just going to have to find a way. Again, thankfully, the schedule is going to ease up significantly. They get a much needed bye, like Caleb just mentioned. I want to get to a couple comments here that we have in the chat, and if you aren't already subscribed, please head over to our YouTube channel. Check us out there. Subscribe to the channel. Helps us out a lot, and we greatly appreciate it. Make sure you're getting all your Bucs written content over at BucsGameday.com. We probably got like 6 articles out since just this game kicked off. So all year round, that's where you can get your Bucs content, or add it to your list of where you get your Bucs content at the very least. Chris Mail on YouTube says Bucky Irving should have been given more carries, especially in the last drive. Caleb, you were speaking of this yourself as well. So you and Chris Mail are seeing this the same way. Tom Brady on the broadcast was saying the same thing also. So when the GOAT's saying it, maybe it's time to take notice. But I think so many Bucs.
Funny thing, him and Kevin Burkhardt just walked by. So
No way. You should have got him on, pulled him in for a little impromptu interview. That's wild. And then what else do we have here? Here's one we're getting lots of comments about recently. Have to fire Todd Bowles. What are your thoughts on that, Caleb? We know your thoughts on Bucky Irving, so we're going to bypass that one because you already made that clear. But the questions about firing Todd Bowles, this is getting crazy now. The Niners tried to give us this game. Previous ones, Falcons games, Chiefs games, things kind of worked against our favor. It felt like luck wasn't on the Bucs side. Today, it felt like it was. 3 missed field goals, all those penalties down the stretch. They still couldn't get it done. So if they can't win either of these games, when luck's with them or against them, does it come back to the head coach, especially when his defense is struggling so much?
It's tough because I didn't see anything necessarily this game to point to where, Todd Bowles, messed up or could have done more. I think he did pretty much all that he can do in an in-game situation perspective. But from a grander scheme of things, you look back, and he's had those moments in game where it's like, what are you doing? And then this year specifically, the amount of injuries is just kind of absurd. Your head coach is really in charge of who your staff is, and that becomes a question: does strength and conditioning right? I know these things happen in the NFL, but it just seems like an absurd amount that are starting to pile up and question that. And Todd Bowles' defense, he owns that defense too. So let's remember that. And they didn't play horrible per se, but there were instances where they should have come away with stops and they weren't able to get it. They should have come away with tackles and weren't able to make a tackle when it was needed. I can go back to early on when Zion and Antoine Winfield had a tackle and both of them just whiffed and allowed a first down. So those are your two best players on the defensive side of the ball, especially in the secondary, and you can't get it done. So I don't know if it's matchups. I don't know if it's just non-focus. I don't know if it's the play calling, but obviously we've expressed over and over again the holes on this defense, not allowing necessarily for Bowles to call the defense that he wants to or at the times that he wants to. JJ Russell in coverage on that long touchdown was just horrible. But it's tough to say that you can blame him for that, but that's pretty much been the status quo this year for his defense other than the beginning of the season where they looked really good until things started going downhill with injuries and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be as high of a calling, for his seat to be open after this game. But I'm sure there's still going to be the people out there that see this as a lapse on his part again because the defense still can't figure it out. Which ultimately, if you're the head coach and you're owning one side of the ball, that comes into play as well into your job status. So it can't be one way or another. And we'll see moving forward how that goes. But as of now, I think it might quiet down for a little bit. But there's going to be those rumblings are going to be out there, and they'll probably continue to be throughout this season and into the offseason because what Liam Cohen is still being able to do with this offense is pretty remarkable considering what he has at his disposal.
For sure. And chances are he'll probably blame any of the issues on communication, which is maybe a bigger issue because that's more reflective of the coaching. If your players, many of whom are veterans and been in your system for a long time, can't communicate, that's a problem. That's a Bulls problem too. I thought that Kancey late hit, a lot of people were like, oh, it shouldn't have been a late hit. That's an undisciplined decision by Kancey, who actually was one of the only bright spots on the Bucs D line there. I thought at least the brightest one. He made some real big plays, couple tackles for loss. But I thought you just can't touch the quarterback. He was well out of bounds. He'd already been pursued and pushed out of bounds. What was your take on that?
Trying to pull up there at the end a little bit, but at the same time, it's going to be a close call either way, and you're pretty far away from the quarterback. You're not even the first guy there, and he's already starting to go down a little bit. He's trying to get rid of the ball. You got to use your head in that situation. I know you're only a second-year player, but you got to know that this game's on the line, and you're giving up free yards, and look what happened at the end of that possession for them. You got the George Kittle touchdown, and that's what happens. And you can blame maybe the refs for interfering there because it was a bang play. It was close. But like I said, like I mentioned before, he didn't need to. Purdy was already on his way down, trying to get rid of the ball, and it was just unnecessary, which is why he got the call, not because it was an egregious hit by any means.
Yeah, and maybe there were a couple of instances where he could have done something different, but that's always the case. Liam Cohen, like with what he's working with, like the Bucks' three leading receivers were two running backs and a tight end: Rashad White, Kate Otten, and Bucky Irving. The only three wide receivers caught a pass, none more than two, and none for more than 11 yards. That was one catch for 11 yards for Ryan Miller, two catches for 10 yards for Rock Jarrett, one catch for 7 yards for Sterling Shepard. I don't know how much longer the Bucs can mask this. Like, if Mike Evans isn't back after that bye week, I mean, a lot of fans I think are at this point thinking mail in the season. We'd be better off getting a higher draft capital. I don't know what happened with Jalen McMillan today. I don't know. Like the expectation was he was cleared to play, but I didn't see him out there. Do you have any updates on that, Caleb?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened either. I was down there at like stadium level, prior to the game, shooting content for us for our social media and whatnot. But he looked fine coming out, going through warm-ups, catching. I was trying to keep an eye on him because I know he's been dealing with his hamstring injury, but throughout the game, it's kind of hard when you're watching up here and trying to stay on top of what you're doing. But I'm not sure what his snap count was or even if he got a snap. I'm sure he was on the field at some point, but he was just kind of non-existent. I'm not sure. Maybe they were trying to use him as a decoy, and that's something, but I'm sure it was talked about probably in the press conference with Todd Bowles, but which River, our lead editor, just got back from. So I'll go check in with him after we get off of this, see if there's any updates on any of these guys and what actually is going on and what was said in those. But from what I can tell, he looked fine, pregame during warmups, and just not sure what direction they wanted to go with him. Maybe they wanted to save him, not kind of push the limits on it, but just to have another body in case it was needed.
Yeah.
But going back to your original comments, that's not going to get the job done. Two wide receivers and a tight end as your leaders. Baker Mayfield not having 100 passing yards until midway through the fourth quarter, even late into the fourth quarter, is not ideal. When Ryan Miller is your number one wide receiver for the day, that tells you something.
Tough look right there. No disrespect meant to Ryan Miller. Last comment I'm going to pull up is from loyal viewer Christopher Cole watching on YouTube. Said, dang, we had our chance to gain some ground on Atlanta, but no. So yes, Atlanta dropping that game to the Saints. And of course, the Bucs still couldn't capitalize. It has been a really tough season, to put it lightly. And there's been plenty of tough Buccaneer seasons before. The crew knows that. But it's the ones where you have expectations, as you should, based on the roster and all the work Jason Light's done to rebuild this team after Tom Brady and the emergence of Baker Mayfield and a really strong draft and, all the established vets they have in place. But there are just, it feels like the football gods do not want this team to succeed this year. That being said, there's still a bunch of games they got to get week right coming up. Right, they get a nice rest, so we'll see what this team can do coming out of the bye week. Maybe they run the table, and it's similar to a couple seasons ago. But thank you to everyone who joined us for this instant reaction episode, who caught us live. Again, one last time, I'll say it. Make sure you are subscribed to the BucsGameday YouTube channel. Make sure you're checking out BucsGameday.com, which is Sports Illustrated's only website credentialed to cover the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And that's exactly what we do. So thank you so much, Caleb, for giving us the inside scoop from down at Ray J. And you'll see both of us and our lead editor, River, on Wednesday. Well, we'll see if we're going this Wednesday. I'm not sure with the bye week. So we actually got to talk about that. I forgot we got the bye week coming up. But regardless, subscribe and you'll know when we're going live. And make sure you're visiting BucsGameday.com. Follow us on Twitter while you're at it. You see our handles right there. Thanks so much, folks. Till next time, go Bucs.